What if I told you that being humiliated in a fancy restaurant could change your life forever? Today's story is about Elena, a grieving widow who walked into Giuseppe's as a nobody, but returned the same evening as one of the most powerful women in the city. This is how karma works in real time. But before we dive into this incredible story, smash that like button if you believe in instant karma, and subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories that will restore your faith in justice. I want you to imagine walking into a place that holds your most precious memories, only to be told you don't belong there. That's exactly what happened to Elena Hartwell on what should have been the most meaningful day of her year. But what the cruel staff at Giuseppe's didn't know was that they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. Elena had been dreading this day for weeks. October 15th would have been her 20th wedding anniversary with David, the love of her life who died in a senseless car accident just 6 months earlier. For 19 years, they had celebrated this day at Giuseppe's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown where David had first told her he loved her. The corner table by the window had become their sacred space, where they'd shared dreams, celebrated promotions, and planned their future together. Now at 45, Elena felt lost in a world that suddenly seemed too big and too quiet without David's laughter filling their small apartment. She'd been living off their meager savings, too heartbroken to return to her job as an art teacher. Most days she barely managed to get dressed, let alone face the outside world. But today was different. Today she needed to feel close to David again. Standing in front of her closet that evening, Elena's hands trembled as she chose her outfit. She pulled on David's old navy coat over a simple black dress, the same coat he'd worn to their first anniversary dinner. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, and wearing it made her feel like he was wrapping his arms around her one more time. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman who had aged years in just months, her once bright eyes now carrying the weight of profound grief. The October air was crisp as Elena walked the 6 blocks to Giuseppe's, her heart pounding with each step. She'd called earlier to make a reservation, but the hostess had been dismissive, muttering something about checking availability. Elena didn't care. She was determined to sit at their table, order David's favorite dish, and toast to the beautiful years they'd shared. Giuseppe's hadn't changed. The warm amber lighting still cascaded over red brick walls adorned with vintage Italian posters. The scent of garlic and fresh basil filled the air, and for a moment, Elena could almost hear David's voice saying, "Close your eyes, Elena. Can you taste the memories in the air?" But as she approached the hostess station, the familiar comfort quickly turned to ice. Gabriella, a 20-something blonde with perfectly manicured nails and a practiced smile, looked Elena up and down with barely concealed disgust. Her eyes lingered on Elena's worn coat, her modest shoes, and her makeup-free face. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she'd rather do anything else. "Yes, I have a reservation under Hartwell. I'd like the corner table by the window if possible. It's my anniversary," Elena said softly, her voice carrying both hope and vulnerability. Gabriella's eyebrows rose mockingly. "Anniversary? Party of one?" She didn't wait for an answer before flipping through her reservation book with exaggerated thoroughness. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any record of a reservation under that name. And unfortunately, we're completely booked tonight." Elena's heart sank, but she glanced around the restaurant. At least 6 tables sat empty, including their corner table. "I can see several empty tables. Perhaps there's been a mistake. I've been coming here for 20 years with my husband. We always sat right over there." "Ma'am," Gabriella's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from nearby diners. "I can see what tables are available, and I'm telling you, we're booked. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere more suitable to your budget." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She felt heat rise in her cheeks as other patrons began to stare. A well-dressed couple at a nearby table, Victoria and James, whispered to each other while shooting judgmental glances in Elena's direction. The woman's expression was one of distaste, as if Elena's presence was somehow contaminating the restaurant's atmosphere. Manager Bruno Castellano approached, his chest puffed with self-importance. At 40, he'd been running Giuseppe's for 5 years and prided himself on maintaining the restaurant's exclusive clientele. He'd been watching the exchange from across the room, and Elena's appearance had immediately triggered his class-conscious instincts. "Is there a problem here, Gabriella?" Bruno asked loudly, ensuring his voice carried to the surrounding tables. This woman claims she has a reservation, but she's not in our system. I've explained that we're fully booked, Gabriella replied, her voice dripping with false professionalism. Bruno sized Elena up in seconds, taking in her modest appearance and deciding she didn't meet his standards. Ma'am, Giuseppe's is a fine dining establishment with a certain caliber of clientele. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the McDonald's down the street. I believe they have a dollar menu that might be more appropriate for your situation. The restaurant seemed to fall silent except for the clinking of silverware and the soft gasps of nearby diners. Elena felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, some sympathetic but most merely curious about the spectacle unfolding. Victoria actually pulled out her phone and began recording, clearly planning to share Elena's humiliation on social media. I understand this is an upscale restaurant, Elena said quietly, fighting back tears, but I've been celebrating my anniversary here for 19 years. My husband David and I always sat at that corner table. This place means everything to me. Bruno's laugh was cruel and sharp. Well, your husband isn't here to pay the bill now, is he? Look, lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but we don't run a charity. This is a business, and frankly, your presence is making our other guests uncomfortable. Even Chef Roberto emerged from the kitchen, shaking his head in disapproval, as if Elena's mere presence was an insult to his culinary artistry. The humiliation was complete, and Elena knew she had two choices: cause a scene or leave with whatever dignity she had left. With trembling hands, Elena reached into her purse and pulled out David's wedding ring, the one she'd been carrying since the funeral. She placed it gently on the hostess stand, the gold band catching the restaurant's warm light. David always said this place had heart. That's why we kept coming back year after year. He believed in the goodness of people. Her voice broke slightly. I guess I was wrong to believe him. As Elena turned to leave, she heard Gabriella's voice behind her. Finally! I thought she'd never take the hint. The comment was followed by barely suppressed laughter from Bruno and several other staff members who had gathered to watch the drama unfold. Elena walked out of Giuseppe's with as much grace as she could muster, but once she reached her old Honda Civic in the parking lot, the tears came in torrents. She sat in the driver's seat, sobbing for David, for their lost dreams, and for the cruel way the world had treated her memory of him. She felt more alone than she had since the day he died. But sometimes, just when we think life has dealt us the cruelest possible hand, fate intervenes in the most unexpected way. Elena's phone rang just as she was about to start her car. Through her tears, she saw an unknown number with a local area code. Normally, she would have ignored it, but something made her answer. Mrs. Hartwell? This is Harrison Wells from Wells, Patterson and Associates. I've been trying to reach you for months. It's regarding your late husband, David's estate. Elena wiped her eyes, confused. I'm sorry, but we handled all of David's affairs months ago. There wasn't much to settle. Mrs. Hartwell, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your husband had assets that have only recently come to light. Are you familiar with cryptocurrency investments? Crypto what? No, David never mentioned anything like that. He could barely figure out online banking. Harrison's voice carried barely contained excitement. In 2010, your husband purchased Bitcoin through an online platform. The records show he bought significant amounts when the price was less than 8 cents per coin. The digital wallet was considered lost until a recent court case allowed authorities to recover abandoned crypto accounts. Elena's hands began to shake again, but this time for an entirely different reason. I don't understand. What are you saying? Mrs. Hartwell, your husband's cryptocurrency holdings are currently valued at $847 million. The phone slipped from Elena's hand. She stared at it lying on her passenger seat, Harrison's voice calling her name through the speaker. $847 million. The number seemed impossible, surreal. David, her sweet, simple David, who worried about spending $20 on dinner, had somehow become a millionaire hundreds of times over without even knowing it. Mrs. Hartwell? Are you there? With trembling fingers, Elena picked up the phone. Are you absolutely certain? This isn't some kind of mistake or scam. I understand your skepticism, but I assure you this is legitimate. The cryptocurrency has been verified, and the legal documentation confirms your inheritance rights. The funds can be transferred to your accounts within hours if you can meet me at my office tonight. Elena's mind reeled. In the span of 30 minutes, she'd gone from being humiliated as a penniless widow to discovering she was one of the wealthiest women in the country. But more importantly, David had left her this incredible gift, even in death continuing to take care of her in ways she never could have imagined. 2 hours later, after signing what felt like 1,000 documents and watching impossible numbers appear in her bank accounts, Elena sat in Harrison's office, still stunned by the turn her life had taken. But gradually, a new feeling began to emerge alongside her shock, a burning desire for justice. Elena called her sister Grace, who arrived within the hour with a team of stylists and a trunk full of designer clothes. Grace had always been the successful one, running her own marketing firm and traveling in wealthy social circles. She took one look at Elena and understood exactly what needed to happen. "Darling," Grace said with a mischievous smile, "it's time to show Giuseppe's who they really turned away tonight." The transformation was remarkable. Elena's graying hair was styled into an elegant updo. Her face was expertly made up to highlight her natural beauty, and she was dressed in a stunning midnight blue evening gown that cost more than she used to make in 3 months. Diamond earrings that Grace had insisted on borrowing from a friend caught the light like stars, and suddenly Elena looked like the powerful, wealthy woman she had become. But here's where the story takes an unexpected twist that even Elena didn't see coming. As Grace's driver pulled the Bentley up to Giuseppe's for Elena's grand return, her phone buzzed with a text from Harrison Wells. The message was brief but shocking. "Just discovered additional documents." David wasn't just investing in crypto. He was the silent partner who originally funded Giuseppe's restaurant in 2005. "You don't just own millions in Bitcoin, Elena. You own the building Giuseppe sits in, and according to the lease, you have full authority over their business operations." Elena stared at her phone in disbelief. David hadn't just left her wealthy. He'd left her the power to decide Giuseppe's very fate. The restaurant that had just humiliated her was actually hers. The cosmic justice of the situation was so perfect, it seemed scripted by the universe itself. When Elena walked back into Giuseppe's at 9 p.m., the entire atmosphere changed. Gabriella, who didn't initially recognize the transformed woman in front of her, immediately shifted into her most obsequious manner. "Welcome to Giuseppe's. Do you have a reservation this evening?" "No reservation necessary," Elena said calmly, her voice now carrying the confidence that comes with unlimited resources. "I'll take the corner table by the window." "Of course." "Right this way," Gabriella gushed, personally escorting Elena to the exact table she'd been denied just hours earlier. "May I start you with our finest champagne? We have a lovely Dom Perignon." Elena settled into the familiar chair, the same seat where she'd celebrated 19 anniversaries with David. But this time, she was alone and more powerful than she'd ever imagined possible. "Actually, I'll have your most expensive bottle of wine." Price is no object. Bruno appeared within minutes, his earlier arrogance replaced by fawning attention. "Ma'am, I'm Bruno, the general manager. I want to personally ensure you have an exceptional evening. Is there anything special we can do for you tonight?" Elena studied his face carefully, watching for any sign of recognition. There was none. The same man who had publicly humiliated her and suggested McDonald's was now treating her like royalty based solely on her appearance and apparent wealth. "Actually, Bruno, there is something," Elena said, her voice steady and calm. "Earlier tonight, a woman came in here asking for this exact table. She was grieving, it was her anniversary, and she'd been coming here for 20 years. Do you remember what happened to her?" Bruno's face went pale as the memory returned. His eyes widened as he began to recognize Elena's voice, her facial features beneath the professional makeup. I'm not sure I recall." "Let me refresh your memory," Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. "You told her to try McDonald's. You suggested she couldn't afford to eat here. You laughed at her grief and made a spectacle of her pain in front of your other customers." The restaurant had grown quiet around them. Other diners sensed the drama unfolding, and several staff members had gathered at a respectful distance, sensing something significant was happening. "You humiliated a woman on what would have been her 20th wedding anniversary. You mocked her love for her deceased husband. You judged her worth based on her clothes and her bank account." Elena paused, letting the weight of his actions settle over him. What you didn't know, Bruno, is that the woman you turned away wasn't just any customer. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out the legal documents Harrison had given her. That woman was Elena Hartwell. And Elena Hartwell, as of this afternoon, is not just a multimillionaire. She's also the owner of this building and the silent partner in Giuseppe's restaurant. The woman you told to go to McDonald's actually has the power to shut you down permanently. The color drained completely from Bruno's face. Gabriella, who had been hovering nearby, audibly gasped. The surrounding diners began whispering excitedly, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. You see, my late husband David wasn't just a customer here for 20 years. He was the investor who helped Giuseppe's get started. He believed in this place, in its potential to bring joy to people celebrating their most important moments. He never told me about his investment because he wanted me to love this restaurant for what it was, not for what he owned. Elena stood up, and despite her petite frame, she commanded the entire room's attention. David also never told me about the cryptocurrency he bought in 2010, which is now worth nearly $1 billion. So when you judged me tonight based on my appearance, you weren't just insulting a grieving widow. You were insulting the person who literally owns your livelihood. The silence in Giuseppe's was deafening. Even the kitchen had gone quiet, and Elena could see Chef Roberto peering through the service window with an expression of horror. But here's what separated Elena from the people who had hurt her. She chose grace over revenge. I could shut this place down tomorrow, she continued. I could fire every person who participated in my humiliation. I could turn this building into a parking lot and never think about Giuseppe's again. She paused, looking around at the staff who were now clearly terrified. But that's not what David would have wanted, and it's not who I am. Elena reached into her purse again and pulled out David's wedding ring, the same ring she'd placed on the hostess stand hours earlier in despair. Instead, I'm going to honor my husband's memory and his belief in second chances. But there will be conditions. She addressed Bruno directly. You will spend the next month working as a busboy in your own restaurant. You'll clean tables, wash dishes, and remember what it feels like to be treated as less than human based on your position. Every customer who walks through that door, regardless of how they look or what they can afford, will be treated with dignity and respect. Bruno nodded frantically, relief flooding his features as he realized he would keep his job. Elena turned to Gabriella. You will undergo sensitivity training and volunteer at the local homeless shelter every weekend for the next 3 months. You'll learn that a person's worth has nothing to do with their appearance or their bank account. Finally, Elena addressed the entire restaurant. Giuseppe's will implement a new policy immediately. One table every night will be reserved for someone who might not typically be able to afford fine dining. A widow celebrating an anniversary alone, an elderly person on a fixed income, a young couple saving for their first real date night. This will be called the David Hartwell Memorial Table, and every meal served there will be complimentary. The transformation in the room was immediate. Staff members who had watched Elena's earlier humiliation now looked ashamed, and several were openly crying. The customers who had witnessed both scenes began applauding, moved by Elena's grace in the face of such cruelty. But Elena wasn't finished. She had one more surprise that would cement Giuseppe's transformation forever. There's something else, she announced. I'm donating $5 million to establish the David Hartwell Foundation, which will provide support for widows and widowers facing financial hardship. Giuseppe's will serve as the foundation's headquarters and will host monthly events to raise awareness and funds. The applause grew thunderous. Elena had turned her moment of ultimate power into something beautiful, something that would help countless others who faced the kind of judgment and cruelty she had experienced. As the evening wound down and Elena prepared to leave, Bruno approached her table with tears in his eyes. Mrs. Hartwell, I don't know how to apologize for what I did tonight. There's no excuse for treating you that way. Elena looked up at him with compassion. Bruno, we all have moments when we forget our humanity. What matters is what we do next. David believed people could change, that everyone deserved a second chance. I'm choosing to believe that too. 3 months later, Giuseppe's had become more than just a restaurant. It was a symbol of redemption, a place where Elena's story was told to every new employee and where the David Hartwell Memorial Table served someone in need every single night. The restaurant's reviews were better than ever, not just for the food, but for the warmth and dignity with which every customer was treated. Elena visited regularly, sometimes alone to remember David, sometimes with other widows she'd met through her foundation. She would sit at their corner table, wearing David's ring now on a chain around her neck, and feel his presence in the transformed atmosphere of kindness that surrounded her. The viral video that Victoria had started to record that first night had indeed made Elena famous, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of mocking a poor widow, the video had captured the beginning of one of the most remarkable stories of karma and grace anyone had ever witnessed. Elena used her newfound platform to advocate for treating all people with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. Standing at David's grave on a crisp December evening, Elena told him about the foundation, about Giuseppe's transformation, and about the thousands of people who had been helped because of his hidden gifts. You always said that money was just a tool, that what mattered was how you used it to touch other people's lives, she whispered to his headstone. I think you'd be proud of what we're building together. As she walked away from the cemetery, Elena's phone buzzed with messages from the foundation staff, from Giuseppe's management, and from people whose lives had been changed by David's posthumous generosity. She was no longer the lonely widow who had been turned away from a restaurant. She was a force for good in the world, carrying David's love forward in ways she never could have imagined. The real twist in Elena's story wasn't just that she became wealthy or that she owned the restaurant that had humiliated her. The real twist was that her greatest revenge was choosing not to seek revenge at all. Instead, she chose to transform pain into purpose, humiliation into hope, and grief into grace. Sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. For Elena, it gave her the power to change not just her own life, but the lives of countless others. And in doing so, it proved that David was right all along. Giuseppe's really did have heart. It just needed someone to remind them how to use it. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that we should never judge others by their appearance. Elena's story reminds us that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can cost everything. Subscribe for more incredible stories of justice and karma, and remember to treat everyone with respect because you never know who they really are. What would you have done in Elena's situation? Let me know in the comments below.